Hi, and welcome to the webinar today, Marketing Lessons from Selling Over $150 million of Accounting Firms. Hope you're all doing well today. I will introduce Brannon, who is my co-host today, shortly, but be really interested to know where you're dialing in from. So I'm in the South Island of New Zealand. Where are you based, Brannon?
Charleston, South Carolina,
Nice.
in the U.S. Yeah.
Yeah, you can use the chat panel to let us know where you're dialing in from. That'd be cool. And if you've got any questions for myself or Brannon as we go, feel free to fire those in. We'll be happy to take those as we go, or we'll stick around for a Q&A at the end as well. So we'll do both of those things. Let me just bring up the chat so I can see what's happening. Yeah, so let us know where you're dialing in from. That'd be great. While you're doing that, I will get into introductions. So I'm Matt Wilkinson, the founder and CEO of BizInc, a company that helps accountants and bookkeepers with websites and marketing. My guest today, as I said, is Brannon Poe. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Brannon.
So I have been brokering accounting firms since 2003, and we sold hundreds of firms. My company is called Poe Group Advisors, and we also have a virtual coaching program that's an 8-week program called Accounting Practice Academy. And our next academy starts on October the 27th. So yeah, I've just had the pleasure of working with a lot of accountants who are in the process of selling or thinking about selling, and also on the buy side. So we help both parties kind of come together.
Nice. And kind of interesting story how we ended up collaborating, right? Like, and well, we've just been talking about planes and flying. Was that yeah, basically my partner, a couple of companies before the company she works for now, was in the States sitting on a flight chatting to Brannon, and yeah, started talking about accountants as you do. She's like, my partner works with accountants as well, so it's cool how those serendipitous encounters happen, right?
No, it really is interesting. And I rarely, usually when I sit on an airplane, I'm usually working. So it was interesting that, we had a conversation at all, but I think it was a flight like from probably Atlanta to Los Angeles or somewhere. It was a pretty decent sized flight. So
yeah. That's cool. Well, we ran this webinar in 2021, and it was a really popular session. And I'll say what I said then is that there's a lot of opinions around accounting. What's the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do, and all of that. But one thing you can't argue with is cold hard dollars. So when somebody buys a firm, well, as accountants, that means something, right? I think that there's a lot we can learn from looking at that, and I guess that's what we're going to talk about today is what constitutes that value, what makes some firms sell for higher multiples than other, and particularly with the marketing lens, which I'm interested in.
yes, yeah, you're right. It's when a transaction happens, it's no longer theory what the firm is worth, right? It's an actual event that you can't really argue with.
Yeah. I've got a friend, an accountant, who is a real geek on M&A and that kind of stuff, and he'll talk all day about valuation models, but at the end of the day, I'll be like, it's worth what someone pays, and that's the truth, right? Do all of that stuff, but yeah, it's worth what someone pays.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Well, just quickly, so I'm going to run a quick poll, and just interested to know if you're thinking of selling your firm, because that's what we're talking about. So a few options there. Yes, within 12 months, within the next 1 to 3 years, 4 to 10 years, and no. I just made these up arbitrarily. I don't know if these are meaningful numbers for you, Brandon. I just thought it'd be interesting to know what people are thinking about. We've let that go for a little bit.
Yeah, I usually get kind of a interesting variation to these sorts of questions. I think a lot of people are, even if you're just open your firm, you're probably thinking about,
Yeah.
want to exit, which is a good way to think, really. If you can always build your firm with that in mind, I don't think that's a bad perspective to have as you make decisions in how you manage your practice.
Yeah. Do you believe in that sort of start with the end in mind?
I'm a firm believer in that. I think, well, I think it really makes you think about what you want. Even if you're building a firm and you realize, like, well, gosh, I could maximize the value if I went this way, but I don't really want to go that way. I want to go this way. And that's okay. But at least you're making decisions. I think it's one perspective in terms of decision making. It's not necessarily always going to lead you to the right answer for you, depending on how long you're going to own your practice, what kind of work you enjoy, the type of people that you want to serve. So I think, but it's one perspective that can often give a lot of guidance to people.
And I quite like, not just in this instance, but I think I've butchered this quote, but it's like restriction is the mother of invention or something like that, right? And it's good to have parameters, I think, in all that you do. Otherwise, you can be quite random in what you do. And if one of those parameters is the valuation of the business, then, it definitely gets you thinking on, yeah, like what type of business you want to run and how you want to run it. And yeah, all of those things are just good business things, right?
Yeah. And sometimes people will pivot more towards the market the closer they get to that sale event or that exit event. And that's okay too. You can run your practice a certain way, and then 5-10 years before you want to sell, you think, well, maybe I should start making this more marketable. And we help a lot of people do that. So that's
yeah. And there's a good book, Rework, by Jason Fried, one of my favorite business books, actually. And he's sort of talking against that idea of starting to, with getting out, but I still think it holds. And he's like, look, build a really good business or firm, and then either then someone wants to buy it or you've got a really good business. They're both nice things to have, So yeah.
I think it's a very good guidepost, not necessarily the end all and be all, but I think it's a very good one.
Yeah, cool. Well, we've got a mixed rate. No one's looking to sell really quickly, so we can sow some seeds of what to do in the kind of medium to longer term. All right. So in terms of what we do at BizInc, just quickly to understand, we cover the whole marketing journey, and that we have this kind of framework plan: attract, engage, convert, and retain. And I was thinking almost like we could add sell maybe comes into this at some point. You get that process working well, leads coming in, growth, retention, and all of that. Then, I think you built a really valuable firm, and that part comes after that. But let's get into what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to ask Brannon a bunch of questions, and let's start with the common questions that accountants ask you. What are the kind of 2 or 3 things that you always get asked when you start talking to firms?
What's my firm worth? What's the market like right now? When's the best time to sell my firm is sort of what that question is getting to. And is there a market at all for my firm? A lot of people don't realize there's even a market. So those are probably the initial questions. To add one more, it's like, what should I do to prepare to sell? That's another common question. So
what is a firm worth? Is there a ratio that normally happens? Does it change over time?
Well, I can kind of give you some broad things that impact the market value of your firm. So this is something very interesting. Most people are very interested in this. So I'll spend a few minutes talking about firm value. And I'll start with sort of the rule of thumb in the industry, which is quite common. Most people have heard of it. It's 1 times. So for the probably the most widespread view of firm value is my firm is worth 1 times annual revenue, give or take. And it's been that way ever since I've been in the business. So for 20 years, it's sort of been that way. And we see some firms go for more. I think the top multiple we've ever received on a practice was probably like a 2x multiple. And then on the other side of that, you find firms where, in a fire sale situation, such as the owner has died or there's a serious health issue, a fire sale, we've seen practices go for 50 cents on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty wide range. And the factors that I'm going to discuss kind of impact the number of buyers for a firm. So that's a key concept to keep in mind as you think about firm value is how many potential buyers are there for my practice? If there are 1,000 potential buyers, then you're probably going to get a better price and better terms than if there are 2 or 3 buyers or 1 buyer. I mean, if you're limiting yourself to 1 buyer, that can really limit. And I think there are a lot of different reasons for that, but it's basic supply and demand forces at play, just basic economics. And every buyer has a different opinion of value for a firm. Every buyer is going to probably have an actual difference in value for a firm. So what's valuable to one person is going to be very different because their skills are different, their talents are different, their vision is different. So what someone can make of a practice versus what someone else can make of a practice can be very different.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that people don't always realize. It's, the fit is super important. So if you increase the number of potential buyers, you're going to increase the odds that the fit is going to be more ideal. And so the things that influence value, if you think about the things that influence the number of potential buyers, location's a great example.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a major metropolitan area, you're probably going to have more buyers than if you're in a very rural area. Now, if you're a cloud firm, then your universe is probably as big as it can be because you're not limited by geography to who your buyer can be. The other thing is like the size of the practice. So, when you get up to a certain point, your number of potential buyers might actually decrease. So when you get over, we think between 2 and 3 million, when you get over that size, the number of buyers in the 3 to 5 million range is going to be less than that of the smaller firms. And if you get into even bigger firms, your universe of buyers is going to be even smaller. So the size of the firm can impact value or the multiple. Profitability, that's pretty obvious. Your buyer's probably going to be borrowing money for the acquisition. Or, if it's a private equity firm, which we're seeing that more and more, they're going to want a certain return on their risk, for their capital. So if you think about debt service, the buyer's likely to have debt service. So how much cash flow is left after debt service? If there's not a lot left, then fewer buyers are going to be interested. If there's a lot of cash flow, more people are going to be interested. That's to understand. How you expose your practice to the market when you go to sell, that is going to greatly impact the number of buyers. So if you restrict yourself to, the buyer across the street that said he might be interested or she might be interested whenever the time comes, and you limit yourself to that one conversation, then you're probably going to get terms or an offer that you might not be able, that you could probably get a better deal if you marketed the firm. And then the other thing I put into the curb appeal category, the look of the office, the longevity of the team, the tech stack, the systems, the quality of the fees. The mix of services actually can have a big impact on your number of buyers. If you've got something in your service mix that's unusual, that a lot of people really just don't want or are not capable of providing, then that can actually pretty severely limit your buyer pool. Um, there are a couple examples of that. Like in the U.S. market, smaller firms, less and less are doing audit work, for example. So if I see a firm that's a smaller firm, like let's say $1 million in revenue, and they've got 200,000 in audit work, well, it might be better to sell off the audit work a few years before you want to exit, and then you've got kind of a more mainstream practice that's more marketable.
Yeah, interesting.
So yeah, so I can talk for a long time about practice value, but that's sort of the gist of it.
And that second question around the right time to sell, I imagine it's a bit how long is a piece of string, but I also imagine there are better and worse times in wider perspectives. Would that be fair to say?
It is, but I always tell people the right time to sell is when you want to do something else with your time. Ultimately, the decision to sell is more about how you want to spend your time than financial. Now, because the practice value, if you assume it's going to somewhat stay consistent, then the longer you work, the more money you're going to make.
Mm-hmm.
So the time to sell is when you really want to do something else. Either you want to retire and you want to enjoy that part of your life, or you've got another business opportunity that maybe has more interest or more opportunity than your practice. And when it's time to go to that, that's the time to sell. So the time to sell is when you're ready to do something else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, cool. Well, we've got a lot to get through, so I'm going to keep moving on. Let's go back one. So I guess we sort of slightly touch on this, but the firms that have a niche focus sell for more than generalist firms. And I guess I was thinking about it when you were talking then. We just sold a house, and the advice is always like, don't paint the walls red, or whatever. It's like white walls, like keep it all kind of general, and then you do widen that pool. But then I guess like niche firms can also have a niche, right? Like, so interested to know on that point.
Well, I think I think I like the niche firm. I think it's smart to focus on a niche in accounting, especially for virtual firms. And what I have seen in the virtual firm realm is that practices that do niche down, they tend to grow faster and they tend to have higher margins. That's been what I've noticed. So I think it's now, will there be certain buyers that won't want that? Yes. But what buyers really want is they want a good living and they want good cash flow to owner. They want to not have to work, a ton of hours to make a living. So if your firm has high margins, then that's going to help you that's going to help you create a better firm. And also if you can grow quickly, and that's where kind of the marketing, I think, comes in, especially I've seen virtual firms, put some dollars into marketing and whatever niche they're going after. And once they get high expertise in that field, then there's almost like a gravity to them. It's like, oh, that's the go-to person. Oh, there's somebody, if you're a business, you think about it, let's say you're a veterinarian and you're looking for a bookkeeper and you don't mind working virtually. Well, wouldn't you want to just go to the bookkeeper, the CPA that just does a lot of veterinarian practices, because that person would know a lot about your industry. They would understand your business pretty quickly. They could give you advice. They could give you better insight. So I think just the thing I like about the niche firm is that it allows you to be very expert. You can be the expert accountant for that client.
Yeah, from a marketing perspective, it's just so powerful. And I think, on a business perspective, I think it's in sort of SaaS terms, it's like having a moat, isn't it? You talk about having a moat. And if you're a generalist firm, what's your mode? Probably that people don't tend to move accountants very much, but nothing more than another firm would have. Whereas, like, if you're an accountant for vets, like you're talking about, and you are the go-to person for that, there's a pretty strong moat there. And the test I like to apply is when I'm talking to firms about marketing. And the phrase I often use is, if you're marketing to everybody, you're marketing to nobody. And if you go to, my test is, imagine you've got to send someone a cold email or a cold call, and you say, I'm an accountant. Would you like to switch? And you're like, why? Okay. We've got great customer service. Yeah, everyone's got that. We're really professional. Well, yeah, I would expect that. We have these high moral standards. Yeah, all the stuff that you read on every other website. No one's gonna even look at that stuff. But if I'm a vet or a digital marketer and someone says, hey, I'm the accountant for digital marketers, and we look at these metrics that you care about, I'm like, oh, I will actually listen to that. It pricks my ears up. So I think it's attractive from a marketing perspective. And then, like you say, if you are the expert, you're going to keep those clients, I think, longer, because you have that expert knowledge that they're not going to get elsewhere. So I think, just from a business model perspective, not necessarily niching the whole firm, but certainly for a company that helps firms with marketing, if they want to grow in terms of new clients in a really, not in a small way, I think you've got to have that focus of a niche, or whatever you want to call it. You've got to have that focus, because if you want to just do general stuff, I think the only way you're going to grow is either through referrals and word of mouth, or internal growth, as in upselling and cross-selling. I think it's very, very hard to do growth campaigns to a general audience.
We actually have a former client who went through our Accounting Practice Academy, and he had a traditional firm when he came in, and he decided, as a result of one of the strategies that he wanted to implement when he came out of Academy, was to create a niche firm, and it was actually in veterinarians. So within short order, like within a couple of years, his new virtual niche practice was about twice the size of his original firm. So that's how fast he was able to grow it.
Yeah.
And so it's I've seen it work extremely well. And then the challenge is, where do I find the staff to staff all this growth? But that's another conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. But
well, interestingly, we've talked about it because I was getting some emails from a company called Barney, which is similar to you, but marketing agencies. So I was kind of interested, and we both agree they've got pretty good marketing. Hey, Brannon, and one of the things they do is put out their valuation metrics as a really interesting PDF, and recurring fees is one. A lot of them are analogous to accounting, but the other one was like having a niche or a focus. They found that agencies that did that sold for much higher multiples. So I thought that's pretty interesting. Hey, we've got a few questions coming in. Hey, Mick, how you doing? We've got a couple. So first one I can answer for you. What do you do to prepare? We've got a free book for you later on in the presentation, so we'll send you that link. And the second question is, I think we've been talking about margins and things like that. What would you say is a good margin? And I don't know whether we're talking about gross or net, or but maybe just talk to margins a little bit, Brannon.
Yeah, so I would say, if you have, and I like to look at cash flow to owner. So margin can mean different things to different people depending on what you're putting in your cost. But if you look at bottom line cash flow to owner, so the cash flow to owner is the profit of the firm, add back the owner's salary, add back any owner discretionary, and add back any kind of non-cash expenses like depreciation and amortization. And that gives you that cash flow to owner number. Now, here's a target. If you have less than 10 people on your team, so a fairly small practice, you should be cash flowing in an ideal setting. You'd be cash flowing 50% or more. So if you're grossing $1 million, I like to see the owner take home $500K a year. And I think a lot of firms fall short of that, but that's a target. I've seen firms far exceed that. And then another metric to think about is owner hours. And owner hours, the goal is less than 2,000 hours per year. That creates a very marketable firm.
What does that end up? These are people who track hours. What does that end up to in weeks for me?
That's 40 hours a week, 2 weeks off a year.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be quite as far. Not very many firms achieve that kind of steady schedule. You're going to have high tax season. You're going to have some seasonality, but
yeah. Need to move to New Zealand. 4 weeks off is standard.
Yeah. I agree. Should be taking more than 2 weeks, but
yeah. We got some more questions coming in, but we'll leave those for a little bit because I've got some more stuff to get through here. So we've already talked to this a little bit, I guess, when we started that first question. I've seen this happening a lot, and I remember when we ran this 2 years ago. I think maybe we add in the cloud aspect here is the important piece, and that's what you were saying, that they were the firms that were really doing well for you. So I guess that's a yes, and maybe we nuance that a little bit.
Yes, virtual is important, but you could have a traditional firm and create a separate virtual practice. I'd actually recommend, if you're thinking about selling it to or you might find that your virtual firm gets to the point where you want to sell off your traditional firm. So it's smart to keep it separate. But yes, can niche firms compete? Absolutely. And I think there's still a lot of opportunity. I'm sure a lot of these little niches are getting filled. But I have seen all sorts of bookkeepers and cloud firms specialize in certain industries. And I think, there's still just a lot of opportunity to do that. And so now, how long will that opportunity exist? I don't know. I think about the internet when it was created, and you could go out and buy, all sorts of URLs were available. You could buy Ford.com, and who knows. And then now it's hard to find a URL that works for you. And I think all these niches are going to start to get filled. So if I were going to give someone advice, do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they're big markets as well. One of the questions that we often get asked, probably daily, I'm just looking at my notes from I did a workshop with a firm yesterday in Australia, and they're really struggling to nail down the niches that they want to compete in. And even when they've narrowed it down, it's still too broad, in my opinion, and particularly in the States with the population base there. Let's pick the example. We've been using vets, and I think, I know the firm we're talking about because I think we do their website. But that's huge, right? There's I live in a pretty small town in New Zealand. We've got at least 2 vets here that I know of, like big practices. I mean, it's a rural area, so I guess there's that, but it's big, right? And like most firms that I talk to in that bracket of kind of below 3 mil, I guess, that we've been talking about, Brannon, they don't want more than a couple of clients a month of like a good quality client, and if you said, well, 24 clients a year, how many vets are there in the States? I have no idea, but it'll be tens of thousands, right? So you don't have to get that much market share to make that business work. And then, they've probably got all these other businesses or entities connected to them. Often I would say, I talked to an Australian firm that became a client last week, and they work with childcare centers, but they have 18 groups, and they want that to become about 100. But within those groups, there's all kinds of other entities, and they sell them other services. So it's a highly profitable firm. So I guess that objection of restricting yourself with niches, I just look the opposite of that and think it's really powerful to do them.
Well, it's scary to like think, well, gosh, am I gonna eliminate? Just think you're thinking about what all you're eliminating from the possible realm of growth, right? But you actually find more opportunity when you niche down, in my opinion, way more. And honestly, if you don't want to scale a business, then maybe don't look at niching down, because what I've seen is the people who are really doing well in this space are scaling pretty rapidly.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think my test that I said earlier, if you went cold to somebody, it doesn't have to be an email or a call. What if you met them at a conference? You go to a vets conference and you walked around telling people you're an accountant. I don't think you're going to get many great conversations starting. But if you went in, you have to mention accountant and tell them what you do around numbers for vet practices and how you've helped, people are going to want to listen to that stuff. That's the difference to me. It's one of them is just like, yeah, so what? I've got an accountant, because most good businesses do. So you're actually talking about not winning someone for nothing. You've got to get someone to switch to you because they're getting the job done already. And I think that's a challenge I often say to people. How are people getting the job done already without you? Because everyone thinks their service is great, me included, but people are getting by without you most of the time. So, it's an interesting one. I've got a little marketing audit that we've launched actually since the last time I read it. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. And what firms can do, anyone listening, you can fill that in. It only takes a couple of minutes, and it will give you a really good assessment of where you're sitting with marketing. So that's worth a look. Apologies for not sharing the slides at the start there. you just got to look at me and Brannon, which is, so hopefully everyone can see that now. Let's move on to the next question. So we're kind of covering these before we go, right? And I guess this is almost it's quite interesting because we ran that almost at maybe not quite the start, but the middle of the pandemic. And I'd imagine, how many more people are in the cloud now because of that. It must be huge with remote work. And it's funny how those events make that stuff happen. I wouldn't say I'm lucky enough. It was definitely not lucky, but an interesting event I went through was a big earthquake in Christchurch in New Zealand, and what that did to most of the businesses there, because they had to move out of the city centre, they got rid of servers and it all went onto the cloud before people were talking about the cloud too much. So it's funny how those non-planned events cause this stuff. So I guess that, yeah, have you seen that with firms that, has the value is there still that? Because what you've telling me last time was that there definitely is noticeable value, or is that kind of like normalized as people have more moved to the cloud?
I actually think they've become more valuable in the last couple of years. We created a cloud pricing factors report on our website. And we have a pretty resource-rich website, and you can download that. But we're seeing multiples. This was 2 years ago. We were seeing the multiples were 15 to 20% higher than traditional firms for a cloud firm. And that's a little bit misleading, because what we also noticed in cloud firms, it's a difficult comparison to look at traditional firms versus cloud firms, because the cloud firms tend to have faster growth. And anyone who's grown a business at any speed realizes that growth eats cash, because you're having to build manpower before you need it. You're having to, there's a lot of cash outlays that come prior to growth being possible. And so I think it's harder to compare, because the cash flow numbers aren't always on par, because you've got this growth that you have to factor in. the reason I believe that the multiples are sort of pushing upward is because in the US, the banks are a little bit more comfortable with these virtual firms.
Mhm.
Even a few years ago, I think the underwriting departments of most of the banks that lend for these deals were not certain at how well these transactions and how well these firms would hold up in a sale. They're getting more comfortable. We had a number of instances where we would put a firm on the market and a buyer would say, "Yep, I'll take it," and we'd have a contract, and then they'd go to the bank and the valuation wouldn't hold up at the bank. So as the banks are allowing the valuations to go higher, we're seeing higher multiples on cloud firms. It's sort of a long explanation of why I think the trend is increasing. I also think even your very traditional firms are becoming more and more modern in their technology. So even if you have a firm that can't be considered cloud, and we can talk a little bit more about what that really means. When I say cloud, I mean this firm can be operated by pretty much anyone, anywhere. Maybe not by anyone, but any competent buyer could operate it from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So a full cloud firm is a virtual team. You got a fully virtual team. There's no office. All clients are serviced virtually. Now there are hybrid arrangements. You might have an office that has a team that comes to work every day and they serve all their clients virtually. Well, that's a hybrid form. It's still kind of cloudish, so it's sort of on a continuum. So I'm seeing even more and more traditional firms have a larger percentage of their clients that they don't meet in the office. You have more and more remote capability for team members with firms. So I think the profession's modernizing, but in terms of like maximizing value at a sale, the full virtual is what's going to give you that cloud premium.
Yeah, interesting. Two questions. One, I guess that's a time limited opportunity as well, because when I got into this game 10 years ago, that cloud was the big discussion point. It's not so much anymore. And people would, accountants would say to me, bookkeepers would say to me, "What do you think of the cloud?" I'm like, "Look, I'm a business owner, and people don't think, they just did it." Like, I don't hear this chat anywhere else. It's like it's not going to happen. It's happened, and yeah, it's just your adoption with it. It's already happened in business. So that'd be one thing I'd say. So do you think that? Yeah, I mean, it's going to go that way sooner rather or later. So people just have to get on board with that.
To be clients that really want to meet in person with their accountants. And I don't think if you're a firm owner, I don't think you necessarily must become a full virtual practice. I think, however, I do think you need to embrace technology and what's coming. What the tools that are available are really amazing. And you don't have to be a cloud firm to utilize those tools. And you don't have to be a cloud firm to have a remote team. You can grow your team, still have an office, still meet with clients, but you could still utilize remote team members. And a lot of our clients are finding that the remote team members, that capability is really helpful at getting the staff that you need. We have a pretty acute staffing issue in the accounting profession in the United States. So that can be a game changer for getting staff.
There's a question from Mick on that actually, which was, if you offshore your team, does that decrease value? Does it have any effect on value? Let's use that question.
I don't think it hurts, and it might help some. It's hard to measure. It's hard to say. The first firm we ever had that did that was in Calgary, Alberta, probably 6 or 7, 8 years ago. And at the time, I had a lot of buyers go, "Ooh, I don't know about this a team in the Philippines. And now, now if it's a model that has proven itself, like if you didn't just switch your team and then now you're trying to sell right after, I think anytime there's any major disruption, recent disruption in the team, that can hurt value. But if you've got an established relationship with an outsourcing company and it works, and you've got a proven track record with that, then I think it's might actually increase the value, because you could make an argument that, hey, if you need to expand, this outsourcing firm can help you expand faster.
Yeah. I would look at it through that lens personally, is just a business operations solution to a big problem that's in the profession right now. Like you say, recruitment, it comes up in almost every conversation I have. I'm sure it does for you. I'm talking to people all over the world. So, that isn't going away. And it isn't going to get solved quickly in any of the countries themselves, I don't think, from what I read. So to me, I'd be like, if you've got a solution that's working, forget that it's in another country or whatever. It's just a solution to an operational problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We actually have a couple of virtual assistants that work on with our team. We've been doing it for a couple of years now. It works very well.
I mean, I'd say it's standard in Australia. It would be probably rarer for me to talk to a firm who didn't have some offshore support, whether that's the Philippines or India. Likewise in New Zealand, I hear it a fair bit in the States and Canada, UK, but in Australia and New Zealand, I would say it's very common for that to be the case. All right, cool. Let's move on to the next question. So, how important is a strong brand? Because just to kind of nuance this a little bit, oh no, actually, it's on the next slide. We won't go to that bit yet. Just let's talk to brand anyway. So, yeah. Is it important?
What were we saying about the next slide?
I was just going to talk to, well, we can cover this off on the next one. I often get asked this question, should we switch to a brand name, or they're just doing it right, so like, I know in some jurisdictions you have to have your name there, but a lot of the time I'm seeing firms go from blah and blah, to something else. Like, and I'm thinking of one in the States. It's funny as we're talking about this, right? They're decent sized firm, traditional client base plus a niche, a really strong one. They've bought a name which is actually an amazing name. And we're helping with the rebrand. We didn't do the name, but the name they've come up with is exceptional. And I would say it's going to help them grow that firm. Now, I don't know whether that specifically comes into the value, but I think all of that put together makes it better. And they're selling off their traditional piece of the generalist piece of their business to grow the other part.
Well, I think and is important to build the business.
Mm-hmm.
My experience is at the point of sale, oftentimes the name changes, and so the brand will change. But the question is how much did the brand have an impact on getting the business to where it was when it was sold?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I look at how I run our own company, and we want a strong brand. We're building a strong brand not with the sale in mind, but we're building a strong brand with our own, the ability to attract the types of clients that we want to attract. So our ability to grow and grow profitably is very much relies on a strong brand. So what I'm getting at is that's really what buyers are looking for. They're looking at, okay, what's the growth rate? What's the margin? What's the profitability? And if you have a strong brand that is transferable, I think you could make that case. You could make a strong argument that, hey, this brand has helped us grow. It's helped us become healthy. You can take this brand and continue with that. So I think it does help in a sale, but I think the most help it does is helps build the business to where it's worth what it's worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And to abstract it from accounting, we can all agree that good brands, however we understand that, do better than weak brands, and brand isn't just the logo or the fonts or anything like that. Brand is, it's how you operate your business. And that does things that people don't often appreciate, which is what we've just talked about. It attracts good staff. Firm I talked to yesterday, they're going through those problems. They're trying to hire. They want to hire locally. They're a cloud firm that's with that local hybrid firm, as you'd say, Brannon, but they really want to keep that local aspect. So they really want to hire. And they do a lot around culture on their website, and they find that helps attract some of the, the younger staff. So all of that is your brand. And, it's intangible, some of that stuff. It's intangible, but very tangible as well, the results of that, I think.
Yeah. And I'm sure you know this, and branding is a really interesting just idea about familiarity and trust. And I read this really interesting column once about like how human brains work. And when we used to live in small villages of 50 people, say, you would understand people's faces, and if you saw their faces so many times, you sort of became comfortable that, okay, that's a safe person in my village. Whereas someone new comes in, you get some people from the next village over come over and you've never seen them before. It can be you're automatically, you don't have that level of trust because you haven't seen them. And branding works on our brains in a similar fashion. It's like how you've seen them, how consistently they've been in the past, how they've shown up. Then you have this trust and this impression and this comfort with the brand. So yeah, I don't know if you've probably done some reading on that, but I thought that was fascinating.
I have actually. No, is it, and I think the book Sapiens talks about that a lot, a bit, that you can only know 150 people, and beyond that, humans can't deal with relations. And that's where things like religions come in, or nation states, these things, shared values to bond people together, to get them to do things like build pyramids or go to war, or do all these things that not just because I know Brannon, he lives around the corner type stuff. And interesting, tying that back to logos. I went to a place called Ephesus in Turkey, which is a very historical place, and there's a big amphitheater there, these old temples, part of the Roman Empire, and they had all the different gods into different temples. So people like to associate particularly with this god or that god, and they were saying that's almost like the start of branding. It was like they like to see Apollo here or there or that kind of thing. Anyway, one of those temples has got a swoosh on it, and the person who came up with the Nike tick, that's where they went and saw it there. So it's quite interesting how that there's a genuine continuum back through all of that with branding. Don't know how that connects to firm value, but it's interesting anyway. I guess an extension of your brand is your website. It's a very visible, and I'd often say you can make yourself look a lot better with a good website than you actually are. Does that ever come into play in the sale?
Yeah, I think it does. I think the website definitely generates an impression on a buyer. But again, I think it goes back to sort of what I was mentioning about marketing before, is that's what builds the practice, what builds the firm. And even firms that are really, really busy, I talk to so many people who are having staffing challenges right now, and the last thing on their mind is new client attraction and getting new clients. But then when you ask them, like, well, take your best client. Would you have room for another client like that, or a few more clients like that? And oh yeah, we'd make that work somehow. So I feel like good marketing and good lead generation and is healthy for a practice, because you can keep the same level of work and always have a continuous elevation of your client mix.
Yeah.
And one way to do that is to have a really good website and do some lead generation and continue to find those high level clients. And that gives you pricing power. So you might, let's say you get some really good clients in, and then you go, well, gosh, we've got too many clients. And I actually have a lot of firms that feel that way. They have way too many clients. Well, pruning your client base and refining that on a continual basis is really a smart way to do business, because you continue to elevate the practice.
I've talked to firms, and I've got a friend who's got that kind of, constipation rather than starvation problem in their business. He's always been busy and he's never known lean times. And he's like, we just don't need to do marketing. And I always push him and say, you should, for those reasons, right? Like, and I think having the problem, like you said, of really good people trying to come through the door, you find a way to solve that problem. And it's a good thing to have, because at some point the tap turns off, like it always does. And I think, being fit in terms of marketing for when that happens. So yeah, I think, and also a website does more than that. Like a big part of that is recruitment. Some of the best websites I see have a really awesome team page on them. Like what's the first thing that anyone is going to do if they're looking to work with you? They do their due diligence and they're going to stalk not just your website, but your socials as well. So if your digital footprint looks out of date, like literally, and in terms of the kind of post you put on there, then yeah, for sure, like that's not a good look.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the team members. And yeah, if it looks like an exciting place to work, a challenging place to work, your best team members, in my opinion, want to be continually challenged. Right. So that means there needs to be some sort of growth in the firm so that people have a place to move up. And if you don't have that as part of your firm culture, some sort of growth in the culture, then that's a problem, right? And firms that do have that are going to be able to attract the very kind of people that you want to attract for a firm. So I think growth can support good team growth, and a good website can support good team growth.
Yeah. Well, we just launched a new offer, so we decided to unbundle our pricing. We've always had a setup fee, and we've decided to remove that, but you can still pay it if you want different bits, but we've just unbundled it from packages. So now we're doing a website where you can pay $49 a month or $4.90 a year and get a basic website, and then it can obviously upgrade from there. And even better, it's ready in a week, which, having built a lot, over 1,500 websites for accountants and bookkeepers, procrastination can be a killer of websites. And that's what's great about this. We've done maybe 5 of these so far, and the feedback has been amazing. It's just like, it's done, it's so quick. And then you can upgrade to get the extra features and content that we do. So if anyone wants to chat to me about that, I'm just going to drop a link into the chat here. Feel free to book some time. And then we've got one more question, and then we'll let you know about how to get Brannon's free book. So yeah, I guess we started to talk about this a little bit, but when I've asked you this question in the past, it's just repeatable growth rather than marketing per se. Does that still hold?
Yeah, anytime you have processes, any sort of like playbook, if you have a practice that you have scaled, and then you can show people like, okay, this is how we did it. This is our marketing process. This is our hiring process. This is our, whatever. The more processes you have, the better. And definitely with marketing, because most of the buyers that we have tend to be they tend to be more entrepreneurial accountants, and some of them come in with quite a bit of vision and ambition. And if you've got something you can say, okay, here's the way to keep growing, then that could be very valuable. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Well, that's a great way to wrap it up. And I think, one of the questions that we got earlier was how to prepare. And I know that's, like you said, one of the questions you get asked a lot. So you wrote a book about it. And even better, people can get that for free. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat and we'll send it in an email after the session. What kind of things does that cover off briefly, Brannon?
Oh, it talks about it talks about a lot. It's concise. I think it's about 70 pages long, so it's not terribly lengthy. You can also, if you want a print copy, you can, when you go to that link, there'll be an option. If you download it, there'll be an option to buy it. You can buy it on Amazon. And it covers, timing, succession planning ideas. We talk about practice value. We talk a little bit about, building a team. We talk about pricing. Pricing is one of the best ways you can change the whole trajectory of your career with pricing decisions. To me, that's like the one lever you have right now. You probably got more pricing power in this industry than I've seen in the 20 years I've been selling firms. So it covers a wide variety. It's divided into 3 sections. Pretty comprehensive preparation guide.
Nice. Well, thanks.
And there's some links. No, I was just going to say there's some links to some free tools too in the book that can help you make decisions, like, kind of take an inventory of what you're doing now, what you don't want to do. You can use that with your team. So there's a lot of really actionable tools that you can get from the book as well.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we've shared Brannon's website there. I do recommend checking it out because, like you said, there's a lot of resources on there, and there's some really awesome stuff. So check that out. And does anyone have any more questions of Brannon? Maybe we can stay around for another couple of minutes. I'll just scan back through the chat and see if there's any more. But I think that was the ones that have been asked so far. Are there any other questions you get asked a lot, Brannon, particularly more recently?
Where do I find staff?
Yeah. One quick question I was thinking while you were talking. So you've got these firms who got like desktop clients and all that kind of thing. Are buyers looking at that as do you think that's an opportunity for someone with a very virtual firm to come in and, revolutionize that kind of firm?
I think what I've learned is, like, a lot of the people who are buying cloud firms, a lot of them are buying multiple firms. Like, we've had buyers look at several different ones. They are looking for firms where they don't have to do that process, where they don't have to do that conversion. I do think the conversions are getting a little easier. I know Xero, for instance, has a pretty good way to help you convert someone from, say, QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop. But yeah, buyers don't really want to buy something and transform it. Now that might change. I think there's an opportunity if someone could figure out how to do that really efficiently and do that well. But a lot of times it's not just the challenge of the technical challenge of moving something over. It's the challenge of getting the client to change is the bigger challenge, or getting the team to change.
Yeah.
And those two things combined can be pretty challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. We move billing systems and servers in the same year. It's a mammoth job trying to get hundreds of people to do something.
Yeah.
Mammoth job. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, we've just come up to the hour, so thanks so much for sharing all that today, Brannon. It's always great to talk to you, and thanks everyone for coming today. We'll send the recording and those links out in the chat. Brandon, if you think of any other links that are worth sharing as well, I will do that, but I think it's all in your resources on your website, isn't it? So yeah.
Correct. Yeah. The resources kind of takes you, we have a podcast, we have a blog, we've got several books that we've written, and yeah, that resources page is pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, cool. Very good. Well, thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Matt. It's always fun. It's always fun.
It's good. Yeah. Take care. All right. Thanks.